Nathaniel, I'm super stoked. You and I have been talking for some time now. And I gotta admit, I was surprised during our last time we chatted because for like the longest time, I felt like you were teaching me a lot about the ropes, like Mercury banking setup, Stripe Atlas. You even put me on to Ink Yourself and so many great resources that as a freelancer trying to become an entrepreneur was really invaluable to me. And I just wanted to let the record show how grateful I am that you went out of your way to do that for me, not expecting anything in return. That's super cool. And then we started talking about like vibe coding, and I was talking about my work with Replit. And then you're like, yeah, Replit's cool. You got to understand, I'm working with Claude Code. And I was like, yeah, let's get into it because we usually don't get to have these kinds of conversations. You've been in the low code game forever, the no
Yes.
code, low code game. So lay it on me. You have been in this space for a while. When did the low code world and the new AI agent world like blend for you?
Probably about 6 to 12 months ago is when it started blending. So I want to say I'm pretty early adopter when it comes to Claude Code. Um, it was before it was officially, allowed kind of thing, officially endorsed, I think. Um, but the technology has changed so much, Philip. The biggest thing is that the big reason that we were using low code is because it allowed us to get to it allowed us to solve the business needs of our customers in a very cost effective way. And it eliminated the bottlenecks for small to medium sized businesses to get the ERP, the large scale software functionality that they oftentimes needed, but didn't know how to get, other than Excel spreadsheets, which is not a scalable solution. So when when we started looking at the technology shift um, between what we were providing our customers a year ago in the low code space and the no code space, we were using Bubble, we were using TrackVia. Um, those are amazing, great tools. There's some really good tools out there, but you're also tied to an ecosystem, which honestly is true even in custom development. And you're also um, you're also tied to that vendor. And so there's some connection points that you need to make sure you're in a good space, which is what we did. We always tried to make sure we were making making the right decision for the customer. But with the advent of vibe coding and now what we call agentic engineering, it allows us to build software in ways that we couldn't and still deliver the value that our customers wanted.
Yeah, a lot of businesses have always struggled with not with essentially settling for whatever was in the marketplace. And
Yeah.
if it wasn't a software that kind of sort of did what they wanted, but then they would be doing double work. And I know this because I was even at a venture backed startup by Sequoia, and they were still using Confluence and Jira, but then doing double work in Google Sheets because
Yes.
most of their team. And so I remember trying to get them to maybe even look at Notion or, I was naive because Notion would never work for a startup at that level and scale. But I just remember thinking something is wrong here. Right.
Yeah.
And so I can only imagine what kinds of things you've seen with the people who've come to you or that you've sent proposals to, knowing they need their own solution.
Correct. Correct. That's a,
What,
I mean,
what are some horror stories that you've come across? You don't have to put
oh,
names, just,
yeah, no,
just
no, no, no. I mean, honestly, we were working with a 50-year-old company. They literally were hanging tags on their pallets. Literally tags on pallets with runners keeping track of inventory back and forth between the office and the warehouse. Literally running back and forth.
like Post-it notes?
The old card tags where you had a little
Yeah.
hook, hole,
Oh,
and it was a
no.
reinforced hole, and but you'd hang the tag to track the inventory, and
Human
that's how they
error. Yeah.
yeah, and being able to switch that kind of thing over to a barcode system, being able to allow the team on the floor and the team in the shop to have a unified system, being able to track and follow their business requirements, out literally cases of filing cabinets of paper, getting that out of those filing cabinets and into a scalable digital solution. That's priceless, right? You remember the was it the MasterCard ads, right? Spend time with your family, it's priceless, whatever.
Right.
But the technology that we were able to bring to the table allowed organizations to get out of those pen and paper, making tons of phone calls, whatever the solution is, because an organization isn't going to be limited by the technology. If you're selling, if you're making sales, if you're doing business, the software, the solution that you come up with is a secondary to the
Yeah.
need to deliver a great product or service, right? And so that's what happens is these customers will, well, all right, well, I gotta track my inventory, so let me pull up Excel. I got to track my project management. Let me pull up Excel. You know, the, I'm in a the number of people that's come to me and say, "Oh yeah, I work for a Fortune 500." You wouldn't believe how much of our business is run on spreadsheets. I'm like, "No, I believe it."
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, spreadsheets can be a powerful thing, but at this point in this day and age, it becomes a napkin at the dinner table that you're just doing some quick math on. You don't want to run and sustain your entire business off of it. That's kind of insane. Version control, unless you're using cloud. I was literally talking to a guy the other day who in California is in charge of the entire California territory for the software and hardware that manages the street lights, and he was
Wow,
talking about how he wanted to get into AI. And, I was kind of telling him, you can be that guy in your company, man. I was giving him, the rah rah because he was like, I don't know. I don't trust it. I didn't even trust social media. And this brings me to a point I really would be interested in discussing with you is how many businesses that already had challenges with software and were kind of, um, they were hesitant to even use because there's a learning curve, right? We're
there
talking about the
is
digital divide, and they're the ones who need the software and the automation the most. How are you approaching that resistance, or do you just disqualify them as customers to begin with?
great question. No, I want to. I'm like you. I want to champion people, right? I want to help them. I want to help them see what's possible and sort of blow their mind a little bit, and then have them become a champion themselves, right? Um, but here's the secret. You don't need to be an expert, right? You don't need to be an expert in you're an expert already. I mean, in your field. And if you've got a business process or systems, don't be trying to solve that business need yourself. That's the way I want to say that's the way I like look, Philip, you're amazing at podcast producing. I don't need you to become an expert in, you know, how to build the podcast production platform also, right? You've got tools that can do that. There's other things. So if you're good at managing a team, you're good at helping get, streetlights managed, whatever that thing is that you're good at, and you've got years of experience doing, don't don't try and switch lanes. Bring someone alongside you that can take that vision, take your knowledge and help expand it and boost you up, right? That's the goal. It's not to give you one more thing to do because trust me, we all have plenty to do on our plates.
No, I think that's valid advice. Anyone, it kind of goes back to the best customers versus the worst customers theory that everyone has silently accepted. That the most expensive customers are usually also the ones that want to be too involved. They pay the least and they scream the most. They have all the pain points, and yet the ones who are the best customers who don't even blink at your price because they expect you to be managing it and solving it, those are the ones who also have the highest leverage and usually the most success. It's not a coincidence. And I'm
No,
always trying not to be that other person who believes we're embarking on the most important relationship I've ever had with someone for over $500. And I'm not being petty and like, balking at $500. But the truth is that the $5,000 even, and that's not even a lot for some people, that project and someone who doesn't blink at that, it's not that they're frivolous with their money, is that they're very protective of their time. And this is kind of what we're getting at, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You want to be protective of your time. You need to be productive of your time. And you need to have good leadership that's willing to recognize that, because sometimes the leaders are like, oh, well, we'll just give it to,
In-house,
whoever,
the
and we'll do it in
intern.
house. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. You just added another thing for that person to do. What we oftentimes do is start talking about how much time are you spending in the spreadsheets? How much time are you spending doing that work? That's literally like, we had a customer who literally, they're a sales organization.
Yeah,
Okay. But they also had fiduciary responsibility for their customers. And specifically, they were in the healthcare space. So every month, they need to go back and touch, the sales reps need to go back and touch each one of their customers and just do a little bit of due diligence to make sure the customer's paying the bills, et cetera, et cetera. And that work was manual. 4,000 customers. And if you start doing the math, it was ridiculous how much time the team was spending trying to touch these customers, right? Which is fine. Makes sense. There was good business reason for it, obviously. And the sales reps were the best person to do it because they've got the relationship with the customer. But what they were then asking the team to do was put all the data into a spreadsheet. So that
manually.
way, the management team could see what all 4,000 rows, right? And then the sales reps would go in and check their 400, because they had 10 team members, 400
Yeah,
per team member, which meant that, they were doing, I don't remember, but it was like half of their time was spent doing the work and trying to check it off, because it was a couple of columns of data per customer every month.
yeah,
And that the management team didn't have visibility into what everyone was doing unless they really started digging into the reporting, right? Because there's no easy way to aggregate reporting and say, oh, John isn't isn't progressing on his 400 contacts fast enough. We're going to run out of month before we run out of contacts,
right.
right? And so we built them a simple app that allowed them to streamline the process. And then over the years, we've improved that process for them, and they've improved it themselves. They've got a guy that's the champion in house. And so now it's getting down to minutes a day as opposed to, 4 or 5 hours a day. And well, guess what
Wow.
that does to your proficiency and efficiency when your sales reps aren't busy punching data into the system? They're actually out making more sales.
No, that's super important. Salespeople should not be doing admin wherever it can be avoided. It can be a necessary evil to some degree, but it should not be. Salespeople should not spend the bulk of their time not doing sales. Defeats the
Exactly.
purpose of their role, right? No, I mean
Exactly.
the without shelling too much on the guy I was talking to about the streetlights. That entire org runs on spreadsheets, right? Like specifically the Microsoft suite. And I remember him telling me like, how do you know when the spreadsheet you're working on in it's not OneDrive because that's the personal one. I remember him saying, but the other one, SharePoint. And he's
Yeah.
like, how do you? He's talking about version control, and he wasn't sure when and how, who was updating what, and there was just a lot of questions in my head. I was like, this. He's like a leader of the sales of the entire region, and those are still some of the challenges he's facing. And for me, I there was a time when someone tried to convince me to start a business called Tech Nephew and to work with people who struggle with technology because of the level of patience I can exhibit with
Yeah.
someone who struggles with technology and my ability to articulate things in a way that they can navigate a UX, UI, like an interface in an app. And I just remember attempting and quickly realizing it wasn't worth the headache because they didn't always have enough money. And yet this digital divide is going to grow more. And to know that it's happening at executive and senior roles is kind of scary to me. That's why I'm glad that you're developing software that is trying to solve for that, and preferably in a familiar interface that, which I imagine you take into account, that the executives can use as opposed to some entirely new thing and they're not into it and they'd rather just do
Yeah.
email, right?
Yeah, exactly. We try and everything that we work with is trying yeah, we try and because we're now with the ability for uh the agentic engineering that we can do these days with the Claude code, and you mentioned Replit and other platforms. There's a lot of them out there. Um, but the technology that AI brings to the table allows us to build custom solutions for businesses in ways that it it doesn't break your workflow. It actually enhances your workflow, and you're like, "Oh, well, this makes perfect sense." And it makes it easier for everyone, um, to work where they are, what they're doing, and and inside of their own workflows. It's not something where you need to go out and spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars to solve a specific pain point. You can do it significantly cheaper.
And what is the onboarding process like once the project is finished for the team? Did you take a lot of work to design it so that you knew it would fit into the current workflows as opposed to
Yeah.
discombobulating the team and now they got to spend time learning a software? And because I remember leading in house at a marketing agency I worked at, they put me in charge of shifting over our project management tools. And I went through the gamut of them. And I was like, man, some of these are terrible. I don't want to throw any names out there or throw any shade on them, but some of these softwares are overproduced or over engineered, trying to be too many
Yes.
things to too many people, right?
Well, so there's two things that I want to respond to. The first one is my rule of thumb is if I have to give you a manual,
Yeah.
or if I have to train you on how to do it, it's not built well enough. It should be so intuitive, so easy to use. You're like, I know you get into the system and you know exactly what you're doing, right? It's just like, okay, I get it. Um, the flip side is that when we're building, so the software that you mentioned, I mean, think about Excel, think about Word, think about any of these platforms that we use on a regular basis. Even Chrome browser, right? You
Yeah.
start adding things into Chrome browser, and you're like, "Oh my goodness, there's so many." It used to be when Chrome started, it was like just a web browser. And now it's a super powerful platform, and it's got all these features and bells and whistles. The the inherent problem with software is you add more features because people are like, "Oh, this is a great idea. I'd love to do it." And you're like, "Yes." And the problem with software, SaaS platforms in particular, is you build it for, and I've been in the SaaS world, right? I've built software for SaaS. So I'm going to digress a little bit here. But oftentimes the sales team is like, dude, if we get this feature in the next 30 days, I can land a $500,000 contract. And right, you start saying those types of numbers, and the leadership team's like, all right, we're building that feature. We're building, we need, especially on an ARR basis, 500K. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I want
You
that
know,
feature.
that's just a given. And so the engineering team is the sales team is telling the engineering team what to build, which isn't necessarily a bad thing unless it's the tail wagging the dog, right? If all you're doing is building to the sales team, um, you're not being strategic. You need to make sure that it's being strategic when you're building software. So back to what I was going to say is that when we're building software, we're not building to every customer, right? We're building software for your organization, your specific needs, your specific vision. So, you know, so we've built software in house, and we're building it the way we need it to be built. We're doing it so that we can track what our specific needs are, And I tell my team, look, if there's something you need, or if there's a, you know, if there's a feature that you need, just let me know and we'll build it. It's not a one size fits all, which is what you're talking about. So as you start adding these things, these features, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, but the 10% of the people want that feature, 90% don't. And so now you have this problem. Okay, do I expose it to the other 90% or do I hide it? And then, but maybe they will use it if I show it to them, right? And of course, that increases the value of the software, which means I have to charge more. I get to charge more. So there's a lot of things that can go negative as soon as you start going into building one solution for everyone. So going back to your original question, I would definitely say we build it simple, we keep it simple, and the bells and whistles are the ones that you want and need, not the ones that everyone else does because they're also using the same platform.
Yeah, now that we've been able to discuss a lot of familiar problems for people in just the knowledge workspace and even SMBs that are using software and struggling to keep up with technology, these are all problems that a lot of people or anyone in the workforce is aware of on a regular basis if they're a business owner or they're working in some kind of startup culture or corporate culture. Now let's get to know and have a little more familiarity with where these opinions are coming from. For you, where did software engineering even start for you? Like, did you study computer science? Where does all this start for you?
Well, that's a fun one. So I grew up in learning computers from a very young age, but never studied software per se. Software was not my, I want to say, roadmap. I came up through tech support, working with customers. People are like, do I left click or right click the button?
I know
You
that
know?
well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I started out in the tech support world. Lots and lots of crazy stories I could tell you. Um, and ended up working in the project management side, working with the engineers. At first, like, okay, here's all the bugs. Now let's fix them. And again, trying to figure out what is it that the user is doing to cause this problem. You know, all right, you have a 1 gigabyte graphic that you're trying to load into PowerPoint or the equivalent software. Why is it not loading very fast? It took me it's like, okay, well, it's a standard file type. It's a JPEG. Then I was like, how big is this thing? They're like, oh, it's a gigabyte. I'm like, what the heck are you doing with a 1 gigabyte JPEG? Oh, it was used for a billboard. I'm like, oh,
Wrong format, wrong
wrong,
resolution. Yep, yep.
wrong resolution entirely. So they'd upscaled it to I have no idea how big. But it's debugging stuff like that you're like, oh, okay, now I know why it's not working right. Let's fix it. Uh, but it's always those types of things, right? And working with engineers to fix the issues that were engineering problems and working with the customers to fix the issues that were customer problems. And it was 50-50 sometimes, sometimes it's like, oh yeah, well, that's not how we thought we were going to be using it, but technically that's a valid use case. Sometimes we found people using the platform and doing things that we didn't expect. And it's like, well, technically that shouldn't be doable, but all right, we'll figure out how to support it going forward. Anyway, so I came up through the project management side and I never learned coding. But over the years, I've gotten really good at talking with engineers. And guess what? I now have an engineer AI. And so all I'm doing is talking with the AI bot as a project manager, knowing the things that the AI is going to be like, okay, it's hallucinating this. It's still that is definitely a thing. And AI doesn't know when to ask the questions. So as an and I teach my engineering team this also. I'm like, look, you need to ask those questions that as an engineer because the bot's like the most junior idiot engineer in the world, but it knows how to code. It still makes stupid mistakes. And so we've got a whole gauntlet of reviews that go through whenever we're making changes just to make sure that the code is clean and well built. But the key is that you have to know what you're talking about when you're talking with AI, and that's true across the board. I mean, as as an expert in your field, you're going to catch it up. You're going to find a spot where it's like making a mistake, but you wouldn't know that unless you're an expert in that field. And that's true across the board, including software development.
Yeah, I definitely second the notion that you're sharing here, and I think it's an important distinction that, for example, right now there's a discussion taking place on the X platform where a myriad of CEOs are beginning to gain an incredible dose of confidence because the AIs, the ones they're using, tend to be sycophantic in the way where they're like, "It's a great idea. You're a genius. No one's thought of this," and really,
Yeah.
it's like a markdown file that was created, which is just like a text file, just a note, and they're putting it on Product Hunt and shipping it. Wouldn't really, it's just like parameters you're asking an LLM to operate through or what have you. And so there's this other side of the digital divide where there are people who used to be in, so it's different from where you're coming from because your exposure to working with engineers, you learned a lot of the semantic that was necessary, important, and relevant, and where those problems existed, whether it was a component or a cloud console, which are things that we got into the weeds that inspired us to finally make this conversation happen. And then you have executives, right, who have been heading companies up and are now getting involved in the development of things and spearheading and thinking we don't even need an engineering team anymore. We can just. So
No.
what are your thoughts on that?
So so I obviously I'm also on X, as well as, X is one of my platforms that I lurk on. And I think one of the things that we're going to find is that it, AI is a leverage tool. AI is going to allow us to increase productivity and output of the engineering team, but it does not replace the brains that engineers bring to the table. The challenge always is, what do we build, not how do we build it? And that's now, in the past, what do we build was also constrained by how much time do we have to build it, right? I couldn't always allocate as much time as necessary to build a solution because I was time constrained and money constrained because money, of course, is time, especially when I'm paying for it. So, what we're dealing with now, what we have the ability to do now, is decrease that constraint, increase my leverage, and increase the value that I'm providing per unit of time and per unit of dollar that I'm investing. And that is huge. So all of a sudden, the value is still there. The need is still there for the engineers. And anyone who tells you differently at this point today is making a mistake if they want to get rid of that. Now, the flip side is, yeah, organizations are going to try and blame AI for downsizing. Obviously, anything I can do to point the blame somewhere else rather than on leadership failures or decisions that I made during COVID and way over
Right,
high.
over hiring. Yeah.
Yep. Anything I can do to shift it and say, well, AI is now causing us to rethink our strategy. Okay, but so is the bottom line because you spent way too much money hiring people that you don't have bandwidth to use.
Yeah.
Now, that's again a leadership and strategic function, in my opinion. And so the goal is always to make sure that you're intentional about the decisions that you're making. But AI in the software development world, it's actually a leverage tool, and it's going to increase productivity, it's gonna increase output. But if you rely on it without intelligence, without the brains, without the leadership, without the vision, you're gonna end up in a very, very bad spot.
Yeah, I mean, I would use an example of something I'm truly capable in outside of podcasting and something I'm just now learning with, I used to teach Scrum classes. So I had some awareness of how to lead a development of software, right? But I'm still learning, a lot. But I have mastery in music. And when I saw that applications and platforms like Suno came into the picture, I've seen and heard what people who don't make music can create with it, and it's kind of like a hallucination where it sounds confident and it sounds good, but I would never sit that on repeat, right? Versus something where I'm actually writing the song, coming up with the melody, understanding the dynamics, and then having it create it. And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty good. But because I knew what I was looking for, what components
Exactly.
created the most leverage and the intended effect, right? And I
That's
think
right.
that corollary then exists for any subject matter expert in view of like leveraging a technology like this.
Absolutely,
And I
100%.
right, and I love that you're pointing to that because yeah, I think the other discussion is there is still a whole army of people, whole demographics of people who want nothing to do with AI. And it sucks because half the time, just like SMBs, it's mostly people who probably would benefit the most from using it. But there's a lot of, it's a lot of feelings around it, and
Absolutely.
a lot of political
Ab
pressures, and it's tough. I mean, as somebody who's always been tech forward, it's kind of like, yeah, this is where I'm going, right? I imagine for
Yeah,
you. Um, do you
yeah.
have
Well,
anyone that you work with who just refuses to use it?
I don't think so. Some of my kids are,
Yeah.
honestly, some of my kids, they're, because there's a lot of questions about ethical stuff as far as the AI, large language models, how they were created, that kind of thing. And I think the young adults, that's my kids' ages, young adults are really worried, and rightfully so, because there's this knowledge gap, right? There's the two sides. You can jump in and start using it. But the other side is, what's it going to do to my career, and what's it going to do to my future opportunities, especially, and a lot of, I want to say, forward thinking leaders are looking at the same thing. And they're like, okay, if I start using AI to eliminate that grunt work that I used to hire my interns for, right? How are my interns that I'm no longer hiring going to get to the point where they're now, you know, executive leaders in my organization? There's this mental gap, this knowledge gap that we're still trying to figure out how to do, and I'm I don't have a good solution for that yet, other than to say, well, guess what? You still need to pay and hire those novices, those people that really you need to train them up with the AI, not because you couldn't do it cheaper, but because strategically you need to do it. And so that's a dilemma that a lot of organizations are struggling with right now.
Yeah, when I sit here and think hard about what you're saying in the moment, in my head I'm hearing or intuiting that we have models that probably have been trained on data, whether it's current data or past data, but it's all online, right?
Yes.
And maybe there are cars that have world models that are out there navigating while driving, but the younger generations have a world model that isn't being trained on yet, right? So if we wanted to create some incentive for tech CEOs, you can unfortunately look at them like world models that'll bring data if you want, although I think that's very misanthropic. You know what I mean? The other side of it is though, is these world models and the context that they're bringing is going to be super and hyper relevant when we discover how they plan to leverage this technology, right? In ways that maybe Gen X or even older than that, or millennials or Gen Z, we're talking even younger than that, right? All of those contexts are super important because not everything for everything being tracked, whether it's on social media, the retargeting through ads and listening through our devices and all the bad secrets that we know are open secrets. For all that, there's still a lot going on. And the younger generations, as we've seen, are having incredible experiences and really bad experiences with AI, just like they did with social media, right?
Yeah,
Some of them have
absolutely.
gone in the completely opposite, in the dark direction, and falling off cliffs and really, I mean, ending lives. I mean, all of this is truly disruptive. And
Yes.
yet we cannot remove the human element from any facet of this, which is why it sucks to see so many people being let go. And then there's this huge talent pool that's suddenly available, but no company wants to hire them because they have this misguided view of how this technology is going to work. And it's just, it's, man, it's such a bag of worms. Or, I don't even know where to go with that other than we can't give up on humans. And if somebody were to ask me why, what's the efficiency? What's the optimism? What are you getting at? Because it's humanity, and all this is supposed to serve us, not replace us. I don't.
No.
Do you have a better, stronger point to that?
Oh my gosh. No, I honestly, no, I agree with you 100%, Philip. The goal is to always, um, always incorporate humanity. I mean, one of my, uh, one of my, one of my core values is positivity, right? The idea that things are going to get better every day. And even when we make a mistake or we fail to do something, that we can learn from our mistakes. And I think that's true across the board. And AI is just going to allow us to learn faster and honestly make more mistakes, I think, but also recover from those mistakes faster. So I think that there's a lot of value in what we're dealing with. And I also look and say, okay, I, you know, yeah, AI is amazing, but learning how to use it effectively and deal with humanity and deal with people, that's still something we're struggling with. And what does that look like? Everyone's got their own opinions. The, the way AI is today is not the way it's going to be in a year. But given the framework that we have today, we look at it and we say it's a tool and we can use that tool. We can use it as leverage. We can use it to improve people's lives, improve the value that we're bringing to the table. And that's an awesome, awesome thing. And I don't need to be afraid of a hammer, right? Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what it
I
is.
don't.
That's what it
It's
is.
a hammer. It increases my ability to solve the problem of putting. You know, a hammer allows me to put nails through wood a lot faster than my hand.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, or the same way a screwdriver gets me, screws in wood.
Yeah.
But then there's this thing called a nail gun, right? And that's ridiculously fast. If you ever watched guys put a roof together, they're like
Boom,
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 boom, boom,
boom,
boom.
boom.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, um, so AI is like a
Which must also
superpower
be
nail
used
gun.
responsibly, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, some of the photos you can find online of like nail guns gone wrong. It's in extremely
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with those machines.
Yeah,
But
it's AI ethics just as a
yeah,
whole,
absolutely,
conversation
absolutely.
to yeah,
There's
yeah,
that
yeah.
that's a whole nother conversation. It'd be a lot of fun. But the point is that it's a tool, right? And it's going to accelerate our ability to progress. Um, and yes, we need to be aware of the dangers, but that doesn't mean we don't not use it.
Yeah. And I try to tell people this, and I know this is way beyond the scope of what we originally intended with this conversation because
No, let's do
now
it.
we're talking about how foreign policy is impacted by this as well. Because yes, we want to toe the line and make sure we're doing things responsibly. We're talking about the environmental impacts, but like no matter what we've been doing, there's always been those discussions, and I'm grateful that there are people who are watching that. Right,
Yeah,
but a perfect
absolutely.
example of bureaucracy that gets in the way is let's look at the Apple App Store. right now there's another trend going on X where even the founders of X and the probably arguably the best product person out right now, Nikita Beer, right, is having trouble getting the X updates, just updates, not even official publishing of a new point oh, right? Just updates to solve a bot problem are stuck in a purgatory for App Store. Now, if anybody don't know, to be a app developer, you've got to pay a certain amount of money a year. And if it takes almost a whole year to update that, and it's because the process is still manual. Now, some people are arguing that it's all the AI vibe coded apps that are clogging up the pipeline for
Pipeline,
review.
sure.
But what are your thoughts on that? Because there's that other side of things where is there too much access to software creation? And I really just think it's developers being upset that so many people have access to this now, you know?
That's an interesting question. So, you know, I mean, the reason that you're paying ostensibly, the reason that you're paying for access to the App Store is so that they can provide that gating, right?
Right.
So that's so when I hear that, oh, it's slow, well, that tells you something about how Apple's handling their process, right? Honestly, I don't know anything about Apple's internal processes, but could they probably expedite it? I know they can if they want to. If there's, if there's incentive there, all of a sudden they can make decisions really fast. But also the flip side is that they can go through and do automation that does the gatekeeping for you, and then the user just reviews the automated reports and says yes or no and provides feedback. But the gating can be automated. And so again, I don't know what Apple's
Right.
internal processes are,
No one
but
does.
no, and totally. Um, but that's my 2 cents on that is that, yeah, it sucks. But here's the flip side. A lot of apps that we're building today, if you were to, an organization, if they've got less than 100 employees, they don't need to get into the App Store. You can create an app and just literally go in and whitelist the number of people who have access to it. And if you try and log in or use the app without it, you can't. It won't let you. So it's a like opt-in process, and so it has to be manually adjusted, which is fine for an organization of 50 employees and I need to give everyone access to this app or whatever, right? Um and so yeah, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I can make money doing whatever." But I think the problem has always been when you're in the software space, and I've been in the VC, private equity, and startup world, it's attention. The problem is attention. It's not building the app, it's not building the software, it's getting the attention and solving the pain point of your target user. And people are like, "Oh, well, I have the same problem, because I have a problem, there's got to be other people that have the problem too." Well, yes, but unless you're in contact with that person, they're not going to know about your product or service that solves that pain point. So, getting that connection is the first thing to solving the problem and then building the solution. So
Right,
that's
right. Yeah.
so just because it's in the app store, yeah, it's nice. But
That's not gonna get you downloads or
it's
yeah, yeah.
not going to get you downloads. One of the famous phrases is the quote from Field of Dreams: "Build it, and they will come."
Right. Not the
And
case in software.
not the case when it comes to software and website development or anything. People are like, "Oh my gosh,
Songwriting, I mean,
yeah,
anything,
exactly." Yes, yes. Just because I wrote a song doesn't mean anyone's going to listen to it.
especially
Even if
not your
it,
friends and family. No.
oh, even if it is on Spotify, right?
Yeah.
It sucks, but that's the truth. Writing a book, any kind of production these days, and it's going to be very, very, very rare that we actually see something take off exponentially and grab massive adoption. Um, the last one that was huge in my world is OpenClaw, right?
Yeah.
We talked about that a little bit, but the number of stars and likes on the different, on the GitHub platform has gone crazy, and it's a nice product. It's really cool. It has some great features and bells, and it does some good work. But it's only as good as you using it, and the thing is that people need to find your solution effective and usable. And if you don't, or they don't, then there's no value in it.
Right. There's a lot of threads, right? And it's probably on me the way I introduced all of it. There was one, and I loved your stance on it, on the responsibility that bigger portals to reach have. Like, even though you don't get mass adoption by being in the App Store, it is cool to see that a company like Apple does draw a hard line at what you can publish with even some of the most popular and most respected developers, like a platform like X and who's heading product there. And that's cool that there's that ethic there, that it doesn't matter who you are. If you're in our app store, it's not a power play, it's a responsibility to make sure things are done the way. Now people can argue, hey, you flagged me for no reason, it's not even worth doing. Fair enough, there might be some human error involved, but it's still cool to see that everyone's on a playing field there, if you want to be in the Apple App Store or the Google Play App Store. But then you said there's also the freedom to publish a web app version of what you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
So it,
And
it just depends there, right?
yeah, and here's the other thing. These days, progressive web apps or PWAs, it bypasses the App Store entirely. And you can get, yeah, as if what I tell people, look, if you're building an app, the first thing to do is do a
Yeah.
PWA. Because it'll get you 80 to 90% of the way there. The only time you're not going to be able to get there is if you're building a game, right? If you're building a game type solution, then you need to go full stack. Otherwise, there's a lot of solutions to test the product market fit. You go to the website with PWA and it pops up. It says, "Oh, you're on a mobile phone. Do you want to add me to your homepage?"
Yeah.
Right? And boom, now you've got the app installed on your phone on your phone, and it bypassed the Apple Store. Now you have some limitations. There's some rules about what you can and can't do. It, but even local memory, local data storage, all of
I
that
was gonna
stuff.
say, yeah, it
Yeah,
exists.
all of that is available inside of these apps that aren't true App Store apps.
And
So
honestly, with a platform like or with a code base like what React Native has been able to develop, and many others, there's Flutter and all these other tools that could be used.
yeah,
And these are all things that you'll come across as you start getting into this space specifically. You can do multi-platform at the same time, and this
exactly.
again helps you kind of get the bugs out of what people hated, what they didn't like. You don't have to go native first right away. It's certainly more difficult, certainly more expensive, and certainly more critical whenever you're doing things. And being able to use alternatives for now, especially when you're starting out, it's totally worth the idea of then going back and having to build something native if it warrants it, right?
Correct. And that's the goal, is to get something out there, test the waters, make sure it's got adoption, make sure it's got users, and then start saying, okay, strategically, where do I want to go with this? What are the things that people like? What are the things that people don't like? What are the things that we're using? What are the things we're not using? And then take it to the next level and decide, okay, where do I focus my time, energy, and money next? Right? But
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a race to the finish line, with that being the final state of my product or service, right? The goal is to test the waters, not to get everything, including the kitchen sink, into the first round.
Now, because it was on me for having a meandering sort of trajectory of this conversation, I want to make sure we bring it home in a way that's
Yeah,
useful for people, because I want to make sure I also capitalize on your experience here. If someone who's listening, who is a founder or they're, a small business owner, and they're like, look, I've heard about it, I've been trepidatious, but I'm thinking about it. What is the baseline that they should absolutely know to be the most useful, to have the most effect when working with a company like you and your agency that helps develop this, or anyone in particular just in that space? What are the baselines they need to know and be familiar with to have the most productive conversations with teams?
Yeah, great question. I would say don't don't come when you want to have a conversation, come with a pain point, not with the solution. You can have a solution ideation. You can say, "Well, this is sort of what I was thinking." Um, but your goal is to come with a pain point and let the team, let the knowledge experts help provide the right solution, right? You walk into a library and you're like, "I need to do research for my senior thesis or my paper," or whatever it is, that got high schoolers, what can I say? They go in, they're like, "Hey, I need to do research on, George Washington Carver." And and I know he was an African American. He helped, is a scientist, but help me out. And then it's the librarian's job. They're the experts. They know what resources are available. They know how to solve your problem better than you do. So lean on the experts for the how. Figure your job is to come in with the what's the pain point. And then it's a collaborative effort, right? Then it's like, okay, well, this is the way I would solve your problem. This is the way that we can work together to take care of that pain point, fix it, right? When we go to the doctor, we're not like, well, doctors hate it when you go to the doctor and say, "Hey, I need this drug."
Self-diagnosed.
Right, exactly. No, they sort of appreciate it too, right? When you're not like totally clueless, right? You're like, "Okay, well, I think it could be these 3 things or whatever." But you leave it to the experts to make that final diagnosis, final recommendations, right? And then they might even be able to say, "Oh, don't do that," right? Even though you saw the ad on TV, that drug is not the right one for you, right? Because they know your specific situation more than the ad on TV does. And so that's where I highly recommend people come in, is figuring out what the pain point is, not necessarily the solution.
What I love about our conversation most is that we've sort of had this thread of trust, not the experts, but trust that people who have put in the work at the very least can help you compress the amount of effort and time that would be required to get the outcome that you're looking for. Right. So we're not saying trust the experts. We're saying trust the work that people have put in to help you get the outcome that you're looking for, especially in software. Right. And I think this is an important paradigm to operate within as AI continues to become pervasive in all that we do. It's important that we understand that AI is a data set that has certain tendencies and certain experiences embedded into it, but in and of itself, even agentic, right, it's still going to need a push and a prod currently, even now, in the state that it's in. And so it's important to ally yourself with the people that you trust and respect the most, or that you have a hint can be respectable and trustworthy as you look at what they're doing online. This is what I'm taking away from this conversation. And I'm wondering if there's some takeaways that you also came across from this conversation that you might be able to share.
Mm. I think that you nailed it, Philip. That's a huge takeaway, is being able to trust. I would add to that, and I say that that's going to accelerate your progress when you do that, because it's going to it's like hitting the fast forward button, right? It's going to accelerate your progress and get you to the final goal much faster when you're going together. When you're working with someone else or working with other people who know what they're doing, you're going to get there so much faster than if you just run on your own.
And so now I got to roll out the red carpet for you. The listeners have heard, they've learned about your background, they've heard how you view the technology, and they can learn a lot more by going directly to you. So, where do you want them to connect with you? And is there anything you're doing that you want them to know about?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is go to nh.technology. That's where you can learn more about me, some of the different software products and platforms I'm involved with, some of the different teams I'm working with. Um, and happy to, have a conversation if any of your listeners want to dig in further. I'm always up for talking tech because that's what I'm all about.
Nathan, man, I'm so glad we got the chance to just do this recorded because this wasn't even like 1%, I think, of how you and I usually discuss, and it's because we weren't trying to get too technical with it. If people are listening and they want something more technical, I'm definitely up for a second discussion that's far more technical.
It would
And
be my pleasure.
it'll be within the limits of my capability, but I think you'll carry that conversation a lot more, which is awesome, and I'd be looking forward to that. But otherwise, I can't thank you enough for stopping by, man.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much, Philip.